the moral dilemma that I chose to discuss is one that I think a lot of people avoid. Us as a society avoid this because people don't want to face the reality of it, but it is factory farming, and I think a lot of people don't want to discuss it because they don't want to know where their food comes from. They just don't want to know the background of it, their animal products. They think it's better to just turn a blind eye to it because you need those products. But there are a ton of reasons to believe that it should be changed, and people should change, and everybody should open their eyes to the reality of all of this and the situation and the animals, what they go through. Not only is it wrong morally, but it also affects us on a greater scale personally, with the environmental waste that's going on. It affects our environment, and the microbial superbugs, which I'll explain what those are. But yeah, all of my sources lead me to believe that this is a moral dilemma and it should be fixed, and it cannot go on for any longer. So my opinion wasn't changed. My standpoint is the same as it initially was. But so my first source, Jonathan Anomaly, said that in What's Wrong with Factory Farming, he said he used the comparison of going back to school or work, and how easy it is to get sick because everybody's in close quarters. And that situation, that comparison, is the same for factory farms. It goes both ways. Pretty much these animals are cooped up in industrial farms, pretty much enclosed sheds without any water, or without any light, or anything, any grass, just concrete floors, and they're in tight quarters. So when they're in tight quarters, they're easily susceptible to viruses because their immune system is weakened by their depressed and stressed out state. So pretty much how it goes is a virus will be on one host, because it'll be pigs, chickens, cows, all in the same vicinity. So pretty much a virus will show up, and it has the ability to jump from host to host, different species, so cow, chicken, pig, so on. And when it does this, it changes its genetic makeup to where it becomes stronger and stronger, and then eventually it becomes a super bug, which several of my sources explain. But so it sounds serious, and it is serious, but once you actually apply it to us and the fact that people are they're consuming these animal products with the potential that they're consuming the virus that has built itself up and to where it withstands treatment. So the antibiotics that they give these animals to keep them alive because they're in such terrible conditions, they become the virus that's being treated with that antibiotic defeats it, and then it completely is not affected by the antibiotic just at all. So when we eat the meat and we take a chance of getting that virus, we cannot be treated. There's no treatment because the virus has already gone through everything, and it's a super virus. So that's like the microbial war. Tom Philpott, in Playing Chicken, goes through the microbial bugs, and he discusses how antibiotics are pumped into these animals because otherwise they wouldn't survive, and that's what makes them that's what makes the virus withstand all these conditions, like I just said. What else? So that's the that's the microbial standpoint of it. And then there's the moral standpoint, which several of my sources go into that more. My first source was Stephanie Brown, Do They Not Bleed? And this automatically caught my attention because it was more like personal to the animals, but she goes on discussing chickens in particular and how they're kept in battery cages, like literally this big, and they can't move, they can't stretch out their wings, they can't do anything. And laying hens, egg-laying hens, their beaks are actually seared off without anesthetic, and they are in the battery cage. And the reason why their beaks are seared off is because they want to avoid feather pecking, which is something that chickens do when they feel stressed, and like because of stress and like depression and boredom, they start picking at each other's feathers and ripping them out. So they take off the beaks. And then she goes into talking about the transportation. She talks about how these chickens, once they live a 6-week lifespan. So they're taken by their legs, by like the workers, and they're thrown into a cage, which usually results in broken wings and broken legs because the workers aren't careful. So they're thrown into cages, and they are sorry, I lost my train of thought. So they're thrown into cages, and they're packed tight, and then they're put onto a transportation, like bus or truck. So on the way there, they're actually allowed to not have, there are laws that protect, that protect like the chickens not being able to have water for 36 hours. Water, food, or like relaxation. Like they can't get out of the cage. So 36 hours that is allowed. So this results in over 3 million chickens per year. They die just on the way to the butcher, the butcher house, the slaughterhouse. So that just goes to show they live a life that's miserable. They don't live, they just are seen as food production. So they live in the cage, and then they're sent off, and that's just a whole nother hell that they have to endure, which I think just knowing that, people should change their ways. But speaking of changing their ways, a source that goes is in opposition to my point is Russell Cross. He talks about how between 2013 and 2050, 72% increase in meat demand in specific is going to occur. So that's something that makes me believe that it's not possible to change the things that happen in factory farms, because in order to produce that mass amount of meat and animal products, eggs, milk, whatever, you have to have the small areas, and you have to have, maximum output and for maximum revenue. So they're using it, it's like cheap, it's cheap to hold them all in the same place, and they get more money because more people are buying meat. So that's something that discourages me, but it doesn't change my point. I still believe that this is a huge issue and it needs to be fixed ASAP, because people are going to be seriously affected by this. Another thing that affects people is that factory farms actually put off, in certain towns, Danielle Nierenberg talks about how there are factory farms that put off like the manure that they shovel up and put into the like the yards, because they have nowhere else to put it. It actually comes up into the air and just like goes through the air and affects surrounding towns, and that manure actually leaks trickles into the river water in certain countries, like developing countries, not our countries, our country. So it trickles into their water supply, and then they actually develop rashes and illnesses, sorry, because of the contamination that's going on. So pretty much, oh, one more thing. Jonathan Anomaly, the one that I mentioned first, he actually brought Immanuel Kant into this because he talks about how it's not a problem unless it's involving rationality and consciousness. So it's not necessary for moral standing, which I think that is the reason why a lot of people avoid this to begin with, because they see animals as just these production beasts. They don't even see them as things that can feel pain. They are conscious of their surroundings. They know what's going on, and they actually are they're capable of having emotions and feeling pain. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that because they see them, oh, it's just an animal. They can't talk. They don't feel pain. That's a lot of people I've talked to kind of have that. One last thing, Peter Singer. I know I was told to include him because he's important and he's a philosopher, but he also goes into like the way that animals are treated and how chickens are just raised. They're born, they're sent off, they live 6 weeks, and then they're shipped off to the slaughterhouse. So basically, it's just overall a lot of people have acknowledged this issue, but nobody really wants to take it into consideration because it's like something seen that it can't be fixed because America is such a notorious like meat-eating country. But yeah, that's my moral dilemma, and I hope that it'll change soon because people need to start realizing what's going on with animals and everything like that.